I've spent 43 years reading balance sheets. You learn to see things in numbers that other people can't see. A late payment isn't just a late payment. A sudden charge at a jewelry store you don't recognize isn't just a charge. They're symptoms. And by the time you can read symptoms the way I read them, the disease has usually been growing for years. My name is Walter Ashby. I'm 68 years old. I built Ashby Construction in Charlotte, North Carolina with a used pickup truck, a borrowed framing nailer, and $4,000 I'd saved working summers in my daddy's auto body shop. That was 1981. By 2008, when the housing market collapsed and half my competitors went under, I was the one buying their equipment at auction. By 2019, when I sold the company to a regional builder out of Raleigh, the check cleared at just under $9 million after taxes. I tell you that not to brag. I tell you that so you understand what they were willing to throw away. The morning it happened was a Saturday in October. The kind of Carolina October day where the light comes in slow and gold through the kitchen window and you can hear the leaves in the front yard whispering to each other when the wind moves through them. I was making coffee, just coffee. My wife Lorraine was upstairs getting ready for our grandson Brody's 8th birthday party. We were supposed to leave at noon. The party was at our daughter Megan's house in Ballantyne, about 20 minutes south. Megan and her husband Trevor had bought that house 3 years ago. I'd put down the down payment, $212,000. Trevor had told me with that thin little smile he has that he'd pay me back when his startup hit. His startup was a wellness app for dogs. I'm not making that up. He'd been working on it for 6 years. I was reaching for the half and half when something hit me in the chest, like a man swung the sledgehammer through the cabinet door and connected with my sternum. I don't have a better way to describe it. 1 second I was thinking about whether I'd remembered to put the card in Brody's envelope. The next second I was on the kitchen floor and the linoleum was cold against my cheek, and I could hear myself making a sound that wasn't a word. My right arm wasn't working. My jaw felt like it was packed with hot sand. I knew what was happening. My daddy had died of a heart attack at 59. I'd had my own warning 2 years before, a stress test that came back ugly, a stent the cardiologist put in at Atrium Health, a prescription for a fistful of pills I took every morning with my orange juice. I knew what this was. I got my phone out of my pocket. I don't know how. I don't remember dialing. I just remember Lorraine's face on the screen, the photo I'd taken of her at Myrtle Beach in 2017, and her voice answering on the third ring. "Walter, I am running so late. Whatever it is, I'll call you from the car." I tried to say ambulance. I'm pretty sure what came out was closer to amber. I tried again. I heard her sigh. That sigh. The one she used when I was being, in her words, dramatic. "Walter, I cannot deal with this right now. I have not even put my face on yet, and Megan needs me there by 11:30 for the photographer. We'll talk in the car." She hung up. I lay there. I listened to the coffee maker burble. I watched a sliver of dust drift across the floor in a beam of sunlight. I thought very calmly, I am about to die in my own kitchen, and the last thing my wife said to me was that she had not put her face on yet. What saved me was a man named Hector Ramirez. He's the lawn guy. Comes every other Saturday. I'd given him a key to the side gate years back. He came around the corner of the house with his blower running and saw me through the sliding glass door. The next thing I remember clearly is a paramedic's gloved hand on my forehead and a woman's voice saying, "Sir, can you tell me what year it is?" I told her 1981. I don't know why. Maybe because that was the last year I remembered being able to breathe. They took me to Atrium Health, Carolina's medical center. Same hospital where I'd had the stent. The cardiologist on call was a young woman, Dr. Nata Patel, who looked about 30 but had a way of speaking that made me trust her instantly. She told me I'd had what they call a STEMI, a full blockage in the left anterior descending artery. The widowmaker. She said if Hector had come 15 minutes later, I wouldn't be talking to her. They wheeled me into the cath lab. Before they put me under, I asked the nurse, a big man with a beard, name tag, said Curtis, if he could try my wife again. He did. He put it on speaker for me, because my hands were strapped down for the procedure. I heard it ring. I heard Lorraine's voice, Lorraine Ashby. Mom, this is Curtis Bowen. I'm a nurse at Atrium CMC. I'm calling about your husband, Walter. He's been admitted with a major cardiac event and we're prepping him for emergency angioplasty. Silence. Then I heard music in the background, a child laughing, and I heard my wife say, "Is he going to live? Ma'am, we're doing everything we can, but it's serious. We'd advise family come to the hospital right away." She paused. I heard her cover the phone partially and say something muffled to someone on her end. Then she came back. "It's just, we have a children's birthday party today. The cake hasn't even been cut. Can you call back later when you know more? It's really not a good time." Curtis looked at me. I will never forget the look on that man's face. He was holding the phone for me and his eyes filled up and his jaw set, and he turned his head a little so I wouldn't see. "Ma'am," he said, "your husband can hear you right now. The phone is on speaker." The line went dead. I went under. They opened the artery. They put in 2 more stents. I woke up the next morning in the cardiac ICU and the chair next to my bed was empty. It stayed empty for 2 days. On the 3rd day, the social worker came in. A nice young woman named Brittany. She told me that the hospital had made multiple attempts to reach my listed emergency contacts, my wife Lorraine, my daughter Megan. They'd left voicemails. They'd called the home phone. Megan had called back once, on Sunday afternoon, and asked the front desk if the bill would be sent to the house or to my email. Brittany said it like she was apologizing to me. I asked her to bring me my phone and my reading glasses. I had 47 texts, none of them from my wife, none of them from my daughter. The 47 were from my office manager, Donna, from Hector, who'd come by the house twice to check on me, from my old foreman, Earl, from my brother in Greensboro, from neighbors. Donna had organized a prayer chain at the church. Earl had driven down from Mooresville and sat in the lobby for 6 hours on Saturday night because nobody had told him I was already out of surgery. I scrolled up through the messages with Lorraine. The last one before my heart attack was from Friday afternoon. She'd asked me to stop at Harris Teeter and pick up a bag of ice. The next message after, and I want you to understand this, because I had to read it 3 times. The next message after was sent on Sunday at 9:47 in the morning. It said, "Don't forget the sprinklers come on Tuesday morning. Make sure you're up to move the cars." That was it. That was the message. From my wife. While I was in the cardiac ICU on a ventilator. She thought I was home. She thought I'd gone home from the hospital after some minor inconvenience and was going about my Sunday. She had not called the hospital back. She had not asked. She had simply assumed that whatever had happened to me was the kind of thing a man like me handled by myself, and she'd reminded me about the sprinklers. I lay there in that bed and I felt something inside me go very still. Not angry, not sad, still. Like a lake when the wind dies completely and the surface goes blast flat and you can see all the way to the bottom. That was the moment I started thinking like an accountant again. 43 years of reading balance sheets, 43 years of looking at numbers and seeing the truth underneath them. I started lying in that bed, doing what I do. I started auditing my marriage. Lorraine and I had been married for 39 years. She'd worked on and off as a substitute teacher in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District until 1996. After that, she stopped. She said the kids were ungrateful and the principals didn't respect her. We could afford it, so she stopped. I thought about the cars. Her Lexus, leased every 2 years, always the new model. The Cadillac Escalade I'd bought her for our 30th anniversary that she said was too big for the parking lot at South Park Mall. The trips. Cabo with her sister, New York with Megan, a cruise to Alaska with a group of women from her book club, none of whom had ever set foot in our house. I thought about Trevor, the dog wellness app, the Tesla Model X he'd talked me into co-signing for 2 years back, just to help his credit. The Patagonia ski jacket I'd seen him wearing at Thanksgiving that retailed for $900, which he'd casually mentioned was a gift to himself for closing a Series A round that, as far as I could tell from the public filings, had never actually closed. I thought about Megan, my only child, my little girl. I thought about how, in the last 5 years, I could not remember a single phone call from her that did not, in some way, end up being about money. The roof, the pool, the private school for Brody, the new kitchen that just had to be done before the holidays. I lay there in that hospital bed and I started writing it down, not on paper, in my head. Numbers I knew by heart. The down payment on the Ballantyne house, $212,000. The Tesla cosign, $94,000. The kitchen renovation, $78,000. The bridge loan to Trevor's startup that I'd written off the next April, $125,000. Megan's car before that, Brody's preschool, Brody's elementary school, the IVF before Brody that they swore would be paid back when they got on their feet, $41,000. I kept going. I went all the way back. The wedding, the first house, the second house. Trevor's MBA at Wake Forest, which he never finished. By the time the sun was coming through the blinds of that hospital room on the 4th morning, I had a number. $1,643,000. That's what I had given to my daughter and her husband over the last 11 years. Not loans. Not really. Gifts I'd told myself were loans because it made me feel less like a fool. And during those 4 days, while I was in a hospital bed and my wife was at home worrying about the sprinklers, none of them came. On the 5th morning, I called my attorney. His name is Bradford Whitfield. He's 72 years old. He's been my lawyer for 31 years. And he answered his cell phone on the second ring, even though it was a Wednesday, and I knew for a fact he was supposed to be on the 8th tee at Quail Hollow. "Walt," he said, "Donna called me. I've been waiting." "Brad," I said, "I'm in room 4217. I need you to come here today. I need you to bring a notary, and I need you to bring everything we have on the trust, the will, the LLC, and the joint accounts." He didn't ask why. That's why I've kept him for 31 years. He was there in 2 hours. What I did over the next 9 days while I was still recovering in that hospital and then in the rehab facility they sent me to was the cleanest piece of financial work I have ever done in my life. And I have done some clean work. Step 1, I revoked the durable power of attorney that named Lorraine as my agent. I had a new one drafted naming Bradford and my brother Dale as co-agents. Step 2. The joint checking account at Troost that Lorraine and I shared, the one she used for groceries and her hair appointments, and, as I had recently come to understand, about $1,400 a month at the Founders Club Spa in Pineville. I left it alone. I did not touch it. I will explain why in a moment. Step 3. The investment accounts at Fidelity, 3 of them, roughly $6.2 million, all in my name only, because Lorraine had told me back in 1994 that investing makes my head hurt. I moved every penny of it into a new revocable trust, with myself as sole trustee and my brother Dale as successor. Beneficiaries: a scholarship fund at Central Piedmont Community College for first-generation college students going into the trades, and a small carve-out for Brody. held in a separate education trust that he could not access until age 25, and that Megan and Trevor could not touch under any circumstances. Step 4. The house in Myers Park, titled in my name only because I'd bought it in 1993 with proceeds from the business and Lorraine had never been on the deed. I deeded it to the trust. Step 5. The lake house at Lake Norman. Same story. Trust. Step 6. The 2 commercial properties off Independence Boulevard that I still owned through Ashby Holdings, LLC. I didn't move those. I didn't have to. They were already structured under the LLC, and Lorraine wasn't a member. Step 7. The will. Completely rewritten, witnessed and notarized in that hospital room by Bradford and a kind woman from the housekeeping staff named Yolanda, who I tipped $100 and asked to please not mention it to anyone. Step 8. I called my CPA, a man named Roger Blanco who'd done my taxes since 1997, and asked him to pull every gift I had ever made to Megan and Trevor. Everyone. He had them. Every check, every wire, every loan. I asked him to prepare an itemized statement and to flag any of it that had been treated as taxable income to them or as a gift requiring a 709 filing. The answer, predictably, was none of it. Trevor had taken $125,000 of investment capital from me in 2018 and never reported it. Not as income, not as a loan repayment plan, nothing. The IRS would find that interesting. Step 9. I made one phone call to an old friend named Cyrus Mendelson, who runs a forensic accounting firm out of Atlanta. We'd worked together on a fraud case back in 2011 when one of my project managers had been skimming. I told Cyrus I needed a complete forensic look at Trevor's startup, every filing, every bank record we could legally pull, every name attached to it. I told him to take his time and do it right. Step 10, and this is the one I want you to remember. I did not contact my wife. I did not contact my daughter. I did not contact my son-in-law. For 9 days, while I rebuilt the entire financial architecture of my life, they did not know I was alive, and I did not tell them. They didn't ask. That is the part that some of you, I know, are not going to believe. You're going to say nobody's family is that careless. Let me tell you what they were doing, because Cyrus pulled the credit card records later, and I have them in front of me as I tell you this. On the Saturday, I had my heart attack. After Lorraine hung up on me at 10:47 a.m. She went to Brody's birthday party. She arrived at 11:34 a.m. According to her toll record on the Ashby-issued Easy Pass, on her Lexus, he charged $42 at a Starbucks on the way there. The party went until 5 p.m. At 6:15 p.m. that evening, the family, all 4 of them, Lorraine, Megan, Trevor, and Brody, sat down for dinner at a steakhouse in South Park called Del Frisco's. The bill was $387, paid for on the joint Truist debit card. My card. On Sunday, Lorraine got her hair done at the salon in Phillips Place, $240. Then she met 2 of her book club friends for brunch at Foxcroft, $86. On Monday, and I want you to hear this, on Monday, the day after Curtis the nurse called her from my speakerphone and told her I was being prepped for emergency surgery, Megan and Lorraine took a day trip to Asheville to look at antiques. They had lunch at the Grove Park Inn. $94. Megan posted 3 photos on Instagram. I have them. Trevor, meanwhile, used the Amex I'd given him for business expenses to charge $2,300 at a place called Bohemia in uptown Charlotte on Saturday night. Bottle service. I had Cyrus look it up while I was in the cath lab, while I was in the ICU, while I was lying in a hospital bed with 2 new stents in my chest, staring at an empty chair and trying to remember the names of the men who had worked for me in 1985, because I had read that doing memory exercises helps after a cardiac event. They were partying. On the 10th day, I came home. I came home in a black Suburban driven by my brother Dale. I had asked the hospital very politely not to call the house. I had asked Bradford to handle the discharge paperwork and the rehab facility scheduling. I had asked Donna at the office to forward my mail to a P.O. box. When I walked into my own kitchen, the same kitchen where Hector had found me on the floor, Lorraine was at the island in her pink robe drinking a glass of Pinot Grigio at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. She looked up. She said, "Oh my God, Walter, where on earth have you been? I'm not exaggerating." That's what she said. "Where on earth have you been?" I looked at her. I felt that stillness again. I said, "I had a heart attack 10 days ago, Lorraine. I called you from the kitchen floor. You hung up on me." She blinked. She actually blinked. And then she said, and I want every man over 50 listening to me right now to remember this. She said, "Walter, you are so dramatic. The hospital said you were stable. I was going to come Monday, but Megan needed me, and you know how you get when I hover." I didn't say anything. I walked past her. I went upstairs. I packed a single suitcase. I came back down. I set an envelope on the kitchen island, right next to her wine glass. She said, "What is that?" I said, "Read it after I leave." I walked out the front door. Dale was waiting in the driveway. I drove away from the house I'd built for her in Myers Park, and I did not look in the rearview mirror. Inside the envelope was a one-page letter, drafted by Bradford and signed by me. It said, in summary, I had transferred all titled assets to a trust she had no claim on. I had cancelled every credit card she was an authorized user on, effective 5 p.m. that day. I had given her 60 days to vacate the house, which she did not own and never had. I had filed for divorce that morning at the Mecklenburg County Courthouse. I had made one provision for her in the trust, a monthly stipend of $3,000 for the rest of her life, contingent on her making no further claim against the estate. $3,000 a month for a woman who had spent $1,400 a month on facials. The letter ended with one sentence I wrote myself, that Bradford warned me against and that I insisted on keeping. It said, "I called you from the floor. You did not come. I have learned what that means." The phone call started about an hour later. I didn't answer. She called Dale. He didn't answer. She called Bradford. He answered, said one sentence, "Mrs. Ashby, all communication regarding Mr. Ashby's estate must go through this office in writing," and hung up. By Wednesday, she had hired a lawyer. By Thursday, her lawyer had called Bradford and started yelling. By Friday, her lawyer had stopped yelling because Bradford had faxed him the trust documents, the deed records, the gift history Roger had compiled, and a copy of the Amex statement showing Trevor's $2,300 bottle service from the Saturday I almost died. Megan came to the rehab facility on day 12. I told the front desk I wasn't accepting visitors. I watched on the camera in the lobby while my only daughter screamed at a 19-year-old receptionist named Tiffany. I watched her tell Tiffany that I was a sick old man being manipulated by my brother. I watched her threaten to sue the facility. She did not, in any of the 4 minutes she spent in that lobby, ask how I was. The hammer came down 6 weeks later. Cyrus had finished his work. Trevor's wellness startup was, as it turned out, not really a startup. It was a vehicle. For 4 years, Trevor had been taking money from a series of older investors, 3 of whom were widowed women in his church, promising them returns on what he described as a Series A round and a B round and a strategic partnership with a major pet retailer. None of it existed. He had spent the money on the Tesla, on the Patagonia jacket, on a beach house in Wrightsville he put in his college roommate's name, on Bohemia bottle service. It was a Ponzi scheme. A small one, about $800,000 in total exposure. But a Ponzi scheme is a Ponzi scheme, and Cyrus had done the kind of paper trail that a federal prosecutor dreams about. I gave the package to the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Western District of North Carolina. I did not have to give it to them. I could have used it as leverage in the divorce. Bradford suggested I do exactly that. I told Bradford no. I told him there were 3 widowed women in a church in Matthews, North Carolina, who had given my son-in-law their late husband's retirement savings, and they deserved to know. Trevor was indicted in March. He took a plea in July. 46 months at FCI Butner, plus restitution he will be paying for the rest of his natural life. Megan filed for divorce from him while he was awaiting sentencing. The Ballantyne house went into foreclosure because, as it turned out, they had been 6 months behind on the mortgage and had been hiding it from me when they asked for help with the kitchen. Lorraine, in the divorce proceedings, fought the trust. Her lawyer was good. Bradford was better. The judge, a woman named Patricia Honoway, who had been on the Mecklenburg bench for 22 years, looked at the medical records, looked at the phone records, looked at the credit card statements from the weekend of my heart attack, and ruled that no element of the trust had been improperly executed. Lorraine got the $3,000 a month. She got her clothes. She got her Lexus, which had 4 payments left. She moved in with her sister in Mooresville. The last I heard, she was working part-time at a Talbot's. I sold the house in Myers Park. I bought a smaller place on Lake Norman near my brother. 3 bedrooms, a dock, a view of the water that turns gold in the evening. Brody, my grandson, the boy whose birthday party they all chose over me. He's 9 now. Megan tried, in the 2nd year, to use him as leverage, to send me photos, to suggest reconciliation for Brody's sake. I didn't reconcile. I didn't have to. I'd set up that education trust the same day I rewrote the will. He'll have $140,000 waiting for him when he turns 25. Controlled by a trustee neither his mother nor his father can influence. He'll know, when he's old enough to understand it, that his grandfather thought about him on the worst day of his life and made sure he was protected. I see him sometimes. Not often. The trustee, who is Bradford's daughter, arranges it. We had ice cream in Davidson last summer. He told me about a video game I didn't understand. I told him about my daddy's auto body shop. He listened. He's a good kid. He didn't choose his parents. I'm 68 years old. My cardiologist says I'm in better shape now than I was 3 years ago. I walk every morning along the lake. I've started woodworking again, the way I did when I was 19. I built a bookshelf for the new house. It's not perfectly square. I don't care. Hector still cuts my grass. He drives up from Charlotte twice a month. I overpay him on purpose. He won't take the extra. I sneak it into his envelope anyway. I'll tell you the thing I learned, and then I'll let you go. I spent 43 years thinking that if I gave enough, worked enough, sacrificed enough, the people I loved would see me. I thought love was a balance sheet, and as long as I kept depositing, the account would stay positive. It doesn't work that way. Some accounts are bottomless. You pour, and there is no bottom and no gratitude and no return. And one day you fall down on your kitchen floor and you find out exactly what your deposits were worth. Mine were worth a hang-up and a Sunday brunch in Asheville. Don't make my mistake. If you are 60 years old or 70 years old and you are pouring yourself into people who would not show up for your funeral, stop pouring. You don't have to be cruel. You don't have to be loud. You just have to stop. I called from the floor. Nobody came. So I got up by myself and I walked away. And I have never, in my entire life, slept better than I do now. I've thought a lot, in the years since that Saturday morning, about how I ended up on that kitchen floor in the first place. Not the artery. The artery, I understand. I mean the rest of it. The 39 years of pouring everything I had into people who would not get up off a bar stool to come find out if I was alive. Here is what I've come to believe. Nothing in a person's life happens by accident. Lorraine did not become the kind of woman who hangs up on a dying husband overnight. She became that kind of woman in slow motion over decades. Because every single time I let something slide, every single time I told myself she didn't mean it that way, every single time I picked up the slack and paid the bill and smoothed the feathers, I was teaching her. I was the teacher. She was the student. And she learned exactly what I taught her, which was that Walter Ashby would always absorb the cost. Megan didn't become a 40-year-old woman who'd take a day trip to Asheville while her father was in the ICU because she was born selfish. She became that woman because for 40 years her father wrote checks instead of holding lines. Trevor didn't run a Ponzi scheme out of nowhere. He ran one because every grift he tried on me, I let him win. The dog app, the bridge loan, the Tesla. Every single time I handed him the rope, I was the one tying the knot. That's the cause. The effect was a wife who hung up, a daughter who didn't show up, a son-in-law in federal custody, a grandson I now see twice a year through a trustee. None of it was bad luck. All of it was the slow, mathematical result of a man who confused softness with love. So if you're listening to me and you're 65 and you're tired and you have a Lorraine or a Megan or a Trevor in your life, I want you to hear me. Being good does not mean being a doormat. There is no virtue in being eaten alive by people who do not love you. The kindest thing I ever did for my grandson Brody was the thing my family called cruel. The day I locked the trust and walked out the door. Because the only way that boy grows up to be a decent man is if somebody in his life finally shows him what a decent man looks like when he says no more. You owe the people you love the truth. You owe them consequences. You owe them the chance to face the bill they've been running. Because if you keep paying it for them, they will never become the kind of people who could love you back. That's the hardest lesson a man my age can learn, and I learned it on a linoleum floor with my right arm not working. And I'm telling you now, so you don't have to learn it the same way. Stand up. Even if it takes you 9 days to do it, stand up.